Hi, I'm Andrea.
Hey, y'all, this is Courtney, and welcome to the Human Design and Liberation Podcast.
This is a space where we explore how human design and liberation theology intersect with the past, present, and future,
with the intent of sharing the beauty and pain of the human experience to encourage you in your liberation journey. Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Really good. I feel very rested.
Good. I'm so glad.
How about you?
I feel good. Today is our 7-year anniversary. So that's pretty fun. Yep.
So beautiful.
And it's on the 7th, which is fun.
Mm-hmm.
So all the 7s. Yeah.
Love 7s. I'm a July baby, so I'm also a 7.
Yes. All the 7s. I love
it. Connected. One more instance of synchronicity between the two of us.
I know. One of the thousands at this point.
So true. Ooh, so today we're going to talk about agency. We've been building up to this conversation over at least 2 episodes, maybe 3.
Really, probably more, because even the strategy and authority conversation was really touching on this.
Yeah. And it's funny because I feel like it was happening to us. It wasn't like we necessarily planned this trajectory. It's like each conversation we were having was revealing itself to realizing that this is really a big part of it, massive part of it. Maybe it is the it.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
It totally is the it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so interesting as we were brainstorming and having our prep chats, and just how much of the work that Ra did in human design and the work that has been done in liberation theology is all kind of getting at this core piece.
Yep.
Agency.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm excited to dive in
too. So definitions. Do we want to kind of start with some?
Yeah.
Let's talk about agency and what agency is. I happen to find a really good, simple definition of agency. And this is actually from an article talking about the importance of teaching agency to children, which, as you all know, Ra's reception of this message about human design, or human design being the message, was for the children. It was to empower the adults to raise their children, understanding their design. So this is something that both Andrea and I kind of embody, as mothers, and also as people who love children, and see so much potential in younger generations. So agency, according to this author, refers to the power to act in the world. It means having the ability to make a difference, to take action, and to influence our environment or our society. I think is another way of putting it. And it really is the power to act when it comes to this idea that Paulo Freire talks about, that change happens with action and reflection. I really feel like that action part is the agency. Or maybe even further still, the reflection is the autonomy piece, which is a little different from agency. It's the ability to kind of take the step back and understand your location inside of a situation, whether that be a societal, relational situation. And then the action is your agency, seeing how you can behave to make that situation different for yourself. Um,
Yeah.
so that is kind of like our little foundation as far as understanding what agency is.
And I think of agency as a natural extension of your life force.
Mm-hmm.
When you are in true self, when you are in alignment with you expressing and being who you are meant to be,
Yeah.
your agency is a natural extension of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really just like the use of your life force towards the things that matter to you genuinely, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not that somebody told you should matter, or not all the not self stuff. So it takes a while to really be centered in your agency, because it takes a while to be centered in who you are. It takes a while to really
Yes.
understand yourself versus what you have been conditioned to be.
Absolutely. Yes. And the strategy authority is that reflection piece. Like the strategy and authority is when we are reflecting in human design, when we are called, this idea of reflection is about um, remembering and remembering and kind of focusing into our authority. So whatever that authoritative center is for us, um, or way of understanding how to make decisions, because it's not always a center for those who are like
Right.
self-projected or lunar authority. Um, and then the action, when to act, how to act, comes from our strategy. So for
Mm.
me as a generator, I have response as my strategy. So kind of looking at Paulo Freire's reflection and action through human design would be to, when I find myself in a situation, um, when I'm approached with an opportunity or approached with a problem or an idea, I take a moment to understand or tap into what my sacral is trying to say.
Yeah.
Um, the and for me, because I'm a triple split, that can take time. So definitely flying in the face of the human design meme land around the immediacy of the sacral voice. It's not
Yeah.
always immediate for all of us because it's connected to a lot of other things. Me being a triple split, it can take some time for me to differentiate like what center I'm hearing when.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
right. And so I take that time to get that, to tap into those nonverbal um sounds, expressions, the way that I have learned how my body reacts when it's saying yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
Um and then using my strategy to respond in the way that is correct for me. And that keeps me aligned in not only building the life that I want, but it keeps me in alignment with my values. So it's like building the world that I want, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. I think autonomy is critical, because autonomy is this process of understanding that you are, like, this is where I end and where you begin.
Yes.
And so much of the dysfunction of supremacy delusion is leaky, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's codependent. It's
Mm-hmm.
you have like even just like oppressor oppressed, or like people pleasing, or
Mm-hmm.
narcissism. Like all of these are all symptoms of people not having clear autonomy,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
how that benefits the power structure within our society. And so, um, ultimately, even though it absconds power or agency, right, to people who are seeking power,
Mhm.
it harms them as well because
Right.
they have to go outside of their own boundaries in order to do that. And
Yeah.
nobody wins.
No one wins. Yeah, I was just talking about this with my spouse, Dave, and in terms of money, because and we want to bring in like finances into this conversation at a certain point, but one thing that's really important to understand is there's no such thing as hierarchy. And one of the ways that white supremacist delusion has manifested in our time is everything being about money.
Mm-hmm.
And money, everything is dependent on money. And the reality that we kind of uncovered the other night is that money was never meant to be some sort of like a pillar of society.
No.
You know, we are a society, human
Yeah.
beings. And so
Yeah.
the fact that we've built a society where money has actually superseded the importance and the consequence of our society, like money has superseded our like human beings
Yeah.
as the most consequential uh piece of
Yeah.
how we work together and how we relate to each other. It is, in my opinion, the reason why we are experiencing literal, uh, just human devastation on a level that I don't think any of us really foresaw. And all of us are having such a, not all of us, but those of us who work towards keeping our humanity and our spirituality intact, something that
Yeah.
we care about these things that we
Yeah.
are struggling with so deeply. Um, and that is a form of how we've been objectified. Our society, the powers
Absolutely.
that be have objectified us. And Paulo Freire kind of points to this. He has this really beautiful, he has so many beautiful like ways of naming features of our society to make them easier to understand. And again, it's not for the purpose of putting anybody in a box. So this is not
Yeah.
about using identity as ways to box in people. It's words to label and name reality so that they can be transformed, so we can like move away from these things. But one of the things he talks about is this identifying the difference between what it means to be an object and a subject. So
Yeah.
the oppressor has decided that the oppressed are objects inside of the societal reality,
Yeah.
that we're workers, we're parents, we're teachers, and it is a box. It is a box, it is a label, it is a function. Like we have
Yeah.
been, our humanity has been like diminished to our functionality inside of a society, and they are the subjects. So the subject is the capitalist, the oppressor. They wouldn't label themselves as oppressors, but
No,
the
but the
leadership.
person who has the power.
Right, right. And the subject can have multiple layers, multiple forms of existence. And so they have opinions and emotions and ideas and language and culture and all of these things. And the object, the worker, their opinions, their ideas, their culture, their language, their ways of being don't matter because they're just workers. They're just this
Yeah.
flat way of existing. Yeah.
And it's interesting because we see that in the way that white crime is described in the media versus
Mm-hmm.
non-white crime, right? Like we see that still
Mm-hmm.
today. The other thing that I think is really interesting is we come by this honestly. Like This has been a tool for 4,000 years.
Ooh,
So I was just telling
on
Courtney before this that I went down a rabbit hole on the origins of supremacy culture, because I remember, and I'm not done with the rabbit hole, so I can't like wrap it up in a tight bow yet. But I remember, so Ryan was reading this book, and I want to say, I'm going to have to ask him what the title of it was, and we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
But the premise was like the history of humanity.
Yeah. Wow.
And so
is it Sapient?
Maybe that's the one. That might be it.
Yeah.
And essentially, so I have this like conversation that he and I had in the back of my mind about like this certain point in our evolution and men becoming a more focal point. I went into a whole rabbit hole back then when he was reading it about the Aryans, which is like the original Aryans many thousands of years ago, which when, they were a nomadic people. I mean, this is like 3,000 or 4,000 BC. This is like a very long time ago. But anyway, they were the first patriarchal society on record. And they were, pretty horrible to women. And the root of that was, it was an equestrian society, and the men who had larger body size were able to be more dominant with the horses, and all of the care that was required, and the ironsmithing and all the tools, etc. Right. And so, they, interestingly enough, influenced much of Eurasia because they were nomadic. They went all the way from Western Turkey all the way to like the end of Mongolia, like that whole corridor. And they would go into like, they heavily influenced what we know of as India, because they would go in and like settle for a while. They actually created the first caste system. Many believe that they were the ones who brought the Vedas to India. So there's a lot there, right? And especially as we're looking at human design, bringing these modalities that have been around for 9,000-10,000 years, but at the same time, this moment where we have gone through the evolution of 1781, where we are now here to commune and express, and then we have to kind of confront the residual of these systems that were built for survival, right? And so when I think about Paulo Freire is for those who haven't listened to prior episodes where we introduced him, he is one of the original teachers of liberation theology. And on that note, you mentioned Ra. So Ra Uru Hu is the founder of human design. So anybody who's listening, like this is your first podcast, I just want you to know who we're talking about, as if they're our old friends. We're so glad you're here.
Yes.
So like when I look at the intersection of objectifying, right? That was literally a subconscious tool for survival. In order to be able to commit the atrocities that had to be committed to survive in their mind, right? We don't know whether or not they had to be. In their mind, atrocities, like in their mind, they had to, go and raid towns or go and, there was a lot of harm happening, like all over, lots of harm. Like we come from a very violent past. And so that objectification was a way to survive, which is a very seven-centered necessity, right?
Yes.
Because of that, we now have the opportunity to say, oh, that actually harms me too. Like I'm not benefiting if I objectify you. And that is a process of us recovering our autonomy and also claiming our agency. Because if we have
Yes.
always been objectified, the only way we know how to survive is to objectify. And so
Hmm.
we are breaking that cycle and creating a new cycle of humanitizing, which is
Yes.
what Freire describes as allowing everybody to be a subject.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that's so good, because I think what it touches on is the fear at the heart of what we're seeing, and
Mm.
fear, the fear of freedom, which is something that I feel like especially Americans are ill situated to understand. Like, we are not situated well to understand how fear and freedom uh can, like, the how fear complicates freedom
Yeah.
for the self and for everyone. And it's there's a line from Toni Morrison, who wrote in Beloved. This is the line from Beloved, and it's freeing yourself was one thing, claiming ownership of that freed self was another.
Yes.
And I want to, and this is make what you said is making me kind of reflect back to the Revolutionary War, which, side note, we are entering um, a time astrologically where Pluto is going to be back in Aquarius, correct? Which
Pluto
is
is an Aquarius.
Pluto is in Aquarius.
Yeah.
And that is, I just want to make sure I'm saying this correctly. That is where Pluto was during the time of the Revolutionary War,
Yes.
the American Revolutionary War.
Also, the French
And
Revolution.
yes, and I believe the Haitian Revolution as well.
Yes. Yes. Because the Haitian
Uh,
Revolution came shortly thereafter. I'll double check.
yes, yes, we'll make sure these are all correct. But we are in a very potent time for evolutionary change, which feels very accurate when you look out the proverbial window, i.e., your like social media, and see what's happening in the world right now. And so, but what it calls me to is this freedom fear cocktail, and how it is ripe. It really does show the the resistance that we still have in ourselves, because we are, according to human design, still evolving beings into
Yeah.
the nine centered way. So we've the change has been made, but there's further change to be had in 2027,
Absolutely.
right? Um, so there's this internal resistance to our full freedom, like really owning our freedom on an individual level, which leaves room, not self, like the not self provides this room for the demagogue, for the
Yeah.
external outer authority to come in and say that in order to um, be free, your freedom is hinged upon literally objectifying yourself. So
Yeah.
literally
In order to survive.
in order to survive.
Yeah.
And that there's no such thing as everyone being free and everyone having what they need. There's only finite resources still. We are still under attack. Um, we are still vulnerable to scarcity. Scarcity is a thing, it's real, it's lurking behind every corner, and we have to come under the umbrella of a certain way of thinking, being, behaving, relating to one another in order to stay on top of
Yeah.
this food chain.
Yeah.
And this is all old, not self, seven centered, now mythology.
Yeah. Now
What
mythology.
was so important about what you said is that this wasn't always mythology. Like what you're saying
It
is
wasn't.
like this mythology has origins in a reality. And also this reality was thousands of years ago and we have evolved.
The reality, the reality was thousands of years ago. I mean, we're in an unbroken chain, right? So
Right.
when you look at like the founders of our society,
Yeah.
those founders are in an unbroken chain going all the way back to the origins of these like dominating ideas, this scarcity mentality. But when you look at like even our nearest ancestors that we study all the time, right? The Romans, they came by it honestly from the Assyrians. So there's a whole chain of how it came to us. I think what was particularly harmful with the Romans is that they learned from the empires that did not succeed. Okay. So there were empires prior to the Romans who did not succeed because they allowed indigenous spiritual practices to exist within the empire. And so the Romans learned, oh, that cannot be possible, right? Especially the later stage, right? So like as they start to colonize Christianity in the early stages of the Roman Empire, they were trying to do the same thing, but it quickly started to go sideways. And that was when they adopted Christianity and then turned themselves into, the Roman Catholic Empire instead of the Roman Empire.
Right. Wow.
Which was a weird, 500-600 year transition where there was a lot of fighting and a lot of, power struggles. And some would even say that was 1,000-year period, but it just depends on, how you define the terms. But I think the important part is how this oppression went from the day to day, I employ you, or I enslaved you because I captured you and I raided your town, to a spiritual oppression on top of it.
Yeah.
It was also a physical oppression, but it was physical and spiritual at that point.
Yes.
And so the scarcity really came in for our direct lineage, right? The lineage of this country, because your direct lineage is different. Like, you're at the impact of the lineage of this country. So it's relevant to you, but
and I'm going to come back to that. But so I'm really glad you pointed that out. But yes, continue, because that's an important aside.
Yeah. So this scarcity mindset, if you think about when these indigenous cultures were obliterated in like the beginning of the Dark Ages, right? So like 400, 500 AD, what came in? Right? What came in were plagues and famine and all of these really tragic societal issues that were then compounded by the dysfunctional power structures at play. And of course, there were times when they were able to get back into alignment, right? Like I think of the time of Queen Elizabeth, or like even the Victorian era, right? Like there are times where it was less acute, but the reality is even during those times, nobody was thriving.
Yeah.
Nobody was thriving. Like, everybody was suffering. There maybe some artists were thriving, but really, like, even when you peel back those stories, they're filled with so much drama.
Yeah.
And so that's really like the genealogy, for lack of a better term, of the scarcity mindset. I'm using air quotes here, or the like identification with scarcity that we have, because that's really what it is. It's like, it's an identification with scarcity as non-negotiable. And that really bumps up against, colonizing the US, where, or, the previously native lands, where you had people who were really fundamentally connected to the abundance of
Yes.
being a human.
Yes.
And
Mm.
I think part of the gift of this clash is that we have an opportunity to come back to that quickly because the land is holding that, right? Like the land here had that.
Wow.
I'm chilling on this. The land here has
Yes.
known that more recently than, say, the land in Europe, right? Because the land in Europe had,
Yes.
many more hundreds of years of that scarcity and um, that extortion, really,
Mm. Mm.
that is required to survive. And so there's much more recent memory here of the abundance and the ways of nature that we are meant to
Mhm.
come back to. And so we do things extra here. Like that's just that's been
Oof.
part, that's how
True.
we were founded. Like we weren't founded by people who
Yeah.
were really happy with where they lived. Like we were we were founded by people who literally were kicked out, for lack of a better term. Like there was no
Yeah.
reason to kick them out, but they were so extreme that they didn't want them in their own country. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, they were extremists in their time.
Yes. They were. Yeah. Violent extremists
Yeah.
also, which I think is
Yes.
another important piece to
Yes.
say. But
Yes.
I mean, but you're right. And this is like such a deep conversation that like I honestly, where my mind's going, I don't even know if I'm ready to fully talk about that yet. But I do think it's really important to bring back this aside that you touched on with indigenous tribes, the people and the land connected deeply through spirituality, and tangible spirituality. Like I want to like put like a big emphasis on this spiritual connection.
It's an animist connection, right? I mean, we've talked about this a little bit with your recent deep dive.
Which is a whole nother thing, which I'm excited. I'm like have chills talking
We're going to have a
about.
whole episode on that.
Yes. Yes. The power of this spirituality, like kind of going back a little bit to the last episode, that the energetic connection between the people in the land of the indigenous communities and, Turtle Island, now United States, and also the indigenous connection of the enslaved Africans, that they had to their land and to the land in general, because I mean, people connected to the land are connected to the land.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
the land.
And the really sad and unfortunate part of what the Europeans were holding at the time is that their connection to the land had been, like you said, spoiled 100 years prior. And so
many hundreds of years
of years prior. And so and we see that in Jamestown,
Yes.
could not cope. And this introducing a genetic bloodline, energetic function, regulation, energetic connection that was missing for a group that was quickly becoming the most powerful in the world.
Right.
Very quickly. And part of the reason why they were able to do that so quickly was that they had and saying this in a very objective way, they had the power to harness the power of this spiritual connection of people and land through enslavement and through genocide, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, they had absconded so much power through enslavement and genocide.
Except for the fact that they never they rarely could experience the thriving on an individual spiritual level.
Absolutely. No, they were not thriving. Again, they were doing what they were taught to survive. And what they were taught was this relentless pursuit of power is the only way that you can survive. They were, and it got disguised as thriving, but
Yeah.
In the end, you see in all of these, you know, there's so much that's been revealed through history of like diaries and letters. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, once you get under the covers, none of them were doing well,
Yeah.
right? None.
Anybody who's seen Hamilton should have a good
Yes.
sense that no one was thriving during this time.
Yeah. No.
That takeaway. They were killing each other. They were literally killing each other over bullshit.
They were killing each other over bullshit and designing systems to kill other people. Like that's what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the systems that we are working to dismantle and reimagine today.
Yeah.
So I think that when it comes back to agency, just to kind of like bring this back full circle.
Yeah.
The intentional erosion of agency, the intentional erosion of autonomy, which then led to erosion of agency, has been part of the way this lineage of society has known to operate. And so when you look at a system like human design and a system like liberation theology that brings you back to the core of your humanity, it naturally leads to repair in your autonomy, which supports you in taking back your agency.
Yes.
And so when we think about, that's the reason I think why we take this work so seriously and why we know this to be revolutionary work. And it's a quiet revolution. It's not needing to correct anyone else, because your energy changes when you take back your agency.
100%.
The power in your voice changes when you take back your agency. And that can be on a small or a large scale. There's no hierarchy, right?
Nope.
Each one of us is needed in whatever way that we're needed. It might be in your own family unit. It might be in your neighborhood. It might be in your workspace. It's needed wherever you are.
Yeah. Those expressions are no less or more critical to your personal, first of all, your individual liberation, and then to our communal and collective liberation than literally anyone next to you. And to bring this like to current day, I think that's something that if you're someone who has been keeping up with the student protests, that it's really important to find sources that are actually coming from the protests themselves to understand what's happening. Not simply because the mainstream media is just trying to paint the whole thing in a very broad, very idiotic, frankly, brush, but to notice the big and small, to notice all the different ways, the different gifts and purposes and callings and personalities and identities and experiences are coming together to build something that is dynamically revolutionary. It's not just one form of protest that's happening in these spaces. There are people providing food to one another. There are people who are bringing music. There are people who are bringing dance and art. There are people who are teaching. There are teachers in the space. They are holding classes in these encampments. There are individuals who are holding religious services in these encampments.
Say, there's a spiritual element too. Yeah.
There's a spiritual element. Everything, every type of expression of community is being represented inside of these spaces. And I think it's really important to understand that this is what revolution actually looks like.
Yeah.
Is the eyes opening to our autonomy, the ability to like move separately from how we were taught to move. Like, we can be taught to move a certain way and we can choose to move differently. And then, as you said, claiming back our agency to actually go through the process of understanding, okay, how do I want to move? How do I want to make this change? And it being something very, very deeply unique, deeply differentiated, using language from human design and the beauty and the impact that comes from that when we choose to embark on that journey and move in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's interesting is that we get confused with agency and individualism.
Yeah.
And so
Speak on it.
agency is what creates the foundation for a healthy community.
Mm-hmm.
Agency is what allows us to be what MLK talked about, right? The beloved community
Yeah.
agency is everyone within that community being honored for who they are,
Mm-hmm.
right? Versus this rugged individualism, which cuts you off from community.
Yes.
So I understand why it's confusing, because when you start getting into, okay, I need to know where I end, where you begin. I need to know what right action is for me. I need to follow my own strategy and authority. It all sounds very individual, and that part is. And then the part where we are communal beings, and a piece of you following your strategy and authority is showing up and communing, right? Because we've made that evolution. We're no longer surviving. We're now communing, and being able to really be authentic within that group of other people is what lays the seeds for true community, true mutual aid, true just living out what we're here to be, right?
Yeah.
We
Collective
cannot do
thriving.
it by ourselves, but we also cannot do it without our autonomy.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we cannot do it alone, but we cannot do it showing up as less than who we fully are.
Yes. As showing up as a piece of who we fully are, right? Because I
Yes.
think we've been showing up as a piece, but
Mm-hmm.
without the understanding that we have given away our power, we've given away that agency. And so we have to find a way to reclaim that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are. And I mean, and these are the tools. This is why we're here. This is part of what Andrew and I fully believe is a part of our purpose, is to share these tools of getting back to autonomy and agency. And we believe that human design and liberation theology hold inside of it so many loving ways of coming back to radical self-love, radical self-trust, and understanding that we are interconnected, we are a beloved community, that my actions directly impact those of others and vice versa. And so moving accordingly is the only way forward.
Absolutely.
And that we have what it takes to do those things. We have innately in us what it takes to live these truths and realities out.
We do. And it's also going to take some relearning. It's going to take some unlearning and relearning. One of the things that comes up quickly when you're following your strategy and authority is that you can't control somebody else's strategy and authority.
Ooh. That part.
and so that puts you into this place of, okay, I really need to understand my autonomy, but I also need to understand our interconnectedness, and how I have to trust that if this is truly a yes for my family, or for the community I'm in, or for the city, right? Whatever you're navigating, it has to be a yes for the other person as well.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're not aware of it. And often you're dealing with the not self, right? Like you're in community with people who are on the journey of being in their true self. And so really being able to hold that truth for yourself while allowing the other person to be on their journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. That's a major part of knowing where you end and someone else begins.
Yeah.
And I would love to talk about that really soon. It's like how this operates communally.
Yeah.
That'd be beautiful.
Yes. I also think that, just looping back to something you said earlier around financial solvency and recognizing that money is just a representation of energy. It is just stored energy.
Yes.
And when we take our agency back, we take back control of that stored energy because we are the regenerative resource, right? So
yes,
when we think about like, financial distress or like, I've been very open about some of the things that I've experienced in the last 5 or so years. And what I had to learn through that is that whatever happens within those supremacist systems is not a reflection of my resource.
Yes.
My resource is my resource. My resource is who I am when I walk in the room. My resource is who I be when things are falling apart around me, right? Like my resource is my life experience. There's so much that cannot be taken away from me as far as that goes. And I would say likewise for you and for anyone listening. And so agency is so intricately tied with our understanding of energy because it is an expression of our energy, right? And money is just that energy stored. And so once we can fully own, okay, my energy is coming from within me. My energy is coming from my skills. My energy is coming from who I am inside. Then you actually become pretty unfuckwithable. Like people cannot fuck you up anymore. And that sends the system screaming, of course, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It totally sends the system screaming, but in the best possible way, because you are claiming your agency, right? And so then that leads to energy coming back to you, which is going to lead to what you need to be able to thrive. I don't necessarily think of it as like a get rich quick scheme. And this is something I'll be, full disclosure, I'm still recovering from this, desire to have all the money in the world. And I'm not saying that like, I don't still desire it because I want to be comfortable. I want my kids to be comfortable. I want the people around me to be comfortable. I want to be able to support the people around me that are suffering. And that gets into, what's possible when we have that financial solvency, when we've reclaimed that agency, and then we can really show up with resources for the people who need it, which is going to be part of the solution of healing from this capitalistic society that is built to like capitalize on everybody and moving into a more regenerative economy where we recognize, like falling on hard times is part of being human. Hey, here's the toolkit for that. Oh, you're having a hard time. Here's the toolkit for that. Like,
absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. I love like what came up for me in this moment is like money is energy stored, but collectivism, mutual aid, that's energy compounded.
It is.
It is. And so one thing I want to finish with is that you can't have community without vulnerability. And one of the things that is the intention behind making everything about money and this capitalization on our energy is to say that if we don't have money, then we don't have something to offer. And if we don't have something to offer, we can't ask for anything in return. So we become very isolated, right? In this capitalistic, rugged individualism. Like how rugged can you be when you're broke? Like what can you, you're sticking so big when you're broke, right? And so this idea that we have both faced, and this is a tough one, but I also believe because it is so emotionally charged that to address it, it means the potency is there. That when we realize that, yes, money is our energy stored, but collectivism is our energy compounded, and we express when we are having a deficiency in a certain type of energy and a certain storage of our energy, then the community can come in and compound what we do have.
Yeah.
And and bring about the stability that the community is for. The collective is for the stability, not money.
Right.
And so, like you said, that sends the system screaming. And it is a very potent way of experiencing agency and autonomy inside community because of our access to our vulnerability.
Totally. I mean, why do you think they're going after the bail funds? Like, that's such a great example, right? I mean, and if they could go after the GoFundMe's, trust me, they would be. Like, they can't, the sheep have left the stable. Like,
yeah, exactly.
So the tide has already turned.
It's
right?
babe, baby. It's babe. We are out here by Ram man.
Yeah. Like, sorry, that ship left. Like, that tide turned. You're not going to be able to turn that. And it's exciting, it's exciting what we're figuring out. And, certain municipalities are experimenting with other, like the basic income and other ways of, giving people back their agency. That's essentially what they're doing.
It's true.
They're re-enfranchising them.
Wow. Yes. Oh, so good. I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. Please, follow, subscribe, comment.
Please, we want to be in conversation.
Yes, we do. All right.
Let us know what your takeaways are and what questions you have. And just thank you for being here.
Yes.
We love
Until
you.
next time.
Until the next one.
Thank you so much for tuning into HD and Liberation Podcast. We hope you've gained valuable insights into human design and its role in building a life of peace, success, satisfaction, and wonder. If you've enjoyed this episode, please show your support by liking, following, and sharing our podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. Your engagement helps us reach more people who can benefit from this wisdom. For exclusive content and to join our thriving community, consider becoming a Patreon member. Your support allows us to continue exploring the depths of human design and its potential for life and community transformation. Stay tuned for more fun, thoughtful, and impacting discussions. Together, we're unlocking the path to a more liberated and authentic life. Thank you for being a part of HD and Liberation Podcast.